The honourable member for Calgary-Nosehill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Canada is a secular state, but we are not, however, an immoral state. Our morality is defined in the shared set of values that sustain our pluralism, and our freedom of speech enables civil society to explore and frame what we define as right and what we define as wrong. The law and policy that parliamentarians set also has the effect of shaping social norms. And in this, I ask my colleagues to, in considering this bill, consider our responsibility as parliamentarians in defining the morality of our country. This is a sacred connection between us and the Canadians that we represent. The introduction of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees certain political rights to Canadian citizens and civil rights of everyone in Canada from the policies and actions of all areas and level of government. It also greatly expands the scope of judicial review in Canada. The Supreme Court of Canada ruling on physician-assisted dying, or the Carter ruling, touches the core of our nation's morality in that it discusses the sanctity of human life and how we should, as a nation, best respect it. It places the onus on Parliament to respond with a new legislative framework to address the issue of physician-assisted dying per the scope of the ruling. It also places an onus on Canadians to actively participate in one of the most transformative debates that Canada has had in a generation. The Minister of Justice, in her speech on this bill, stated, "From the start, we've known that the Supreme Court of Canada's unanimous Carter decision, that it's not about whether or not to have medical assistance in dying, it's about how we will do it." I disagree. The debate in this place that the Carter ruling has spurred is about how we respond to the ruling, not simply how to allow physician dying to occur. This is material because the Carter ruling does not allow us to abdicate from our responsibility to decide whether physician-assisted dying should occur or in what context it should be allowed. To be clear, with this bill, the government has chosen to respond to the Carter ruling by allowing physician-assisted dying to occur in the context defined therein. It could have responded to it in many ways, including the invocation of the notwithstanding clause of the Charter. My concern with the government's approach to the Carter ruling is multifaceted, but particularly troubling to me is that much of their rationale for their response seems to be that the Supreme Court has forced Parliament to allow a framework for physician-assisted dying. In this matter of deep concern and sensitivity to all Canadians with all viewpoints on this issue, this is not a sufficient enough explanation to show the government's intent over time as to how approaching broader questions related to physician-assisted dying should be addressed. I say this not simply as an indictment of the government, but as a cause for reflection for all of us. While the Carter ruling came out over a year ago, all of our political platforms and national debates were largely silent on approaches to this issue during the last federal election campaign. While parliamentary panels and committees did a remarkable amount of work in a short period of time, similar legislation in Quebec took nearly 6 years of public engagement to draft and pass, and even then, Quebec's National Assembly was divided. There are issues the government has touched upon in relation to the Carter ruling that I do not believe that Canadians have given us a clear mandate to legislate upon. I also believe that this bill in this current state will leave provincial legislatures and medical associations with unresolved legislative issues, leading to a balkanized patchwork of legislation and processes related to this issue. And while I appreciate that the government must respond to the Carter ruling in a shortly defined period, I'm concerned that the government has not clearly specified its preliminary positions on many issues raised in the Joint Committee report, and in tone has resigned itself to the inevitability of future charter challenges on this legislation. In this context, I respectfully urge my colleagues here and the government to deeply focus on our responsibility as parliamentarians to respond to the Carter ruling with firmness and clarity, and to do the following. First, change the timing of the parliamentary review of this legislation to 2 years after coming in force as opposed to 5 years, and to develop a strategy to actively engage a wide range of Canadians in this discussion. This will promote us as legislators and our electorate to embark upon a fully informed discussion of how to best provide end-of-life care and ease of sufferings to Canadians, with the hope of engaging more Canadians on issues that arose in the Joint Committee report, which I don't believe that we have a clear mandate to legislate upon and are beyond the scope of Carter. This early review would also allow Parliament to assess the efficacy of the government's proposed safeguards. The review of this legislation should also be held on a regular as opposed to one-time basis. The requirement of an annual report to Parliament regarding the response to the Carter ruling would also be helpful. Second, the government has signaled the need to study issues of use of advanced directives in physician-assisted dying, availability of physician-assisted dying to mature minors, and the definition of conditions beyond the scope of the Carter ruling under which physician-assisted dying would be available in the future. To date, the government has not described the framework, the timing, or the scope under which these studies would occur. This needs to be rectified immediately, hopefully with the input of members from a broad range of the community. Further, the government should commit to taking policy responses to these issues to the electorate before allowing them to come to pass. Third, this bill is silent on direction regarding conscience rights of medical practitioners in faith-based care facilities and being required to provide physician-assisted dying to patients. In this, we are forcing this issue to be decided by provincial legislatures and by medical associations. This silence is an abdication of our responsibility to the electorate, as the Carter ruling clearly outlines the need for Parliament to respect the charter rights of both patients seeking physician-assisted death and the conscience rights of healthcare providers. I also have concerns regarding the selection of a panel approach to approval as opposed to the way that the bill currently outlines the selection. Fourth, I'm concerned that the government's response to date to the Carter ruling is simply this bill. This fails a significant component of the Carter ruling. The ruling relies upon, in its conclusion, the assumption that a legislative framework allowing physician-assisted death would ensure that physicians properly inform patients of their diagnosis and prognosis and the range of available options for medical care, including palliative care interventions aimed at reducing pain and avoiding the loss of personal integrity prior to allowing physician-assisted death to occur. In this, I believe Canadians have the responsibility to ensure that the range of options available to patients in this situation is robust and in every situation enables people to lessen their suffering while living. In saying this, I no way diminish the legislative right for patients to choose their path of their end-of-life care. However, our country will have failed them if our response to the Carter ruling simply focuses on legislative mechanisms to allow physician-assisted death to occur, rather than also placing a significant new emphasis on increasing and improving the range of available options for patients facing grievous and irremediable medical conditions. Our response should also be clear about the limitations we would place on further expansions of the scope of access to physician-assisted dying. This includes a formal response from all levels of government, civil society, non-governmental organizations, Canada's faith community, and individuals to talk about and address the following: the mental anguish those facing grievous and irremediable medical conditions experience, how to support those who provide care to those who are suffering, reducing barriers to access to end-of-life care, including isolation, availability, and cost, reducing the stigma of mental health issues in Canada and providing care and compassion to those facing this issue, and ensuring a culture in which suicide is normalized, does not arise, and ensuring strategies for suicide preventions are prioritized. Ensuring that medical professionals have robust and comprehensive training on end-of-life care, developing and funding a comprehensive palliative care strategy to be implemented at the same time this bill comes into force, ensuring that physician-assisted dying does not evolve in our society as a promoted response to a diagnosis of a grievous and irremediable medical condition, engaging research institutions and granting councils in a discussion on how to fund and manage research related to end-of-life care, and ensure that these learnings are effectively translated into public policy and clinical practice. This discussion should not be treated as static, and a mechanism to address the success of programs and initiatives in coordination with provinces and territories, healthcare providers, civil society, and the public at large to address these issues on a regular basis should be immediately implemented. Our collective response must first and foremost come from a place of compassion for those who are suffering. Our response must recognize the spirit of the Carter ruling and that Canadians ultimately have the right to choose their path of care. However, we cannot abdicate our responsibility to respond to these issues to the courts, to other levels of government, nor should we see a legal framework in which physician-assisted dying occurs as a comprehensive response to the Carter ruling. Instead, we should ensure that our response is comprehensive, is clear and thoughtful, and is backed by a mandate from Canadians. Our covenant with our electors and the respect for the sanctity of life demands nothing less.